Did you have to do to qualify for the stay away?
Isn't that incredible?
Hello, everyone.
I crushed the pig.
Okay, that's working. Thank you all for coming today to Free and Equal Presents Independent Politics, Electoral Reform, and the Peace Movement. I'd like to begin by thanking our student organizer, Steve Horn, and the Campus Anti-War Network, along with Patrick Barrett at the Haven Center, and WYOU for the video and live stream, and the University of Wisconsin for graciously hosting our event, and also the Wisconsin Union Directorate Society and Politics Committee. My name is Steve Burns. I'm the program director for Wisconsin Network for Peace and Justice. I'll be the moderator tonight, and all that means is that I'll be reading introductions to introduce you to each speaker, and trying to keep our speakers within time, and they've all assured me they'll do that. So the way this will run is each speaker will introduce themselves and take about 5 minutes to contribute their part of the discussion. At the end of that, I'm going to ask a single question of the entire panel to open up a general discussion so panelists can speak amongst each other, and then we'll get as quickly as we can to your questions. Two of our panelists are not here at the moment, but are attempting to get here. One had a flat tire, and the other one got a speeding ticket and had some construction. So the automobile world is conspiring against us, but we do have an all-female panel here as a result of that. The two men on the panel both had automotive problems, something we don't see enough of, so glad to see that. So I'm going to launch and start by introducing someone who certainly doesn't need an introduction to the city of Madison, Cindy Sheehan. Cindy Sheehan is an American anti-war activist whose son, Specialist Casey Sheehan, was killed on October 4th, 2004, while serving in the Iraq War. In August 2005, she attracted national and international media attention for her extended anti-war protest at a makeshift camp outside of President George W. Bush's Texas ranch, a stand which drew both passionate support and angry criticism. She is a vocal critic of President Barack Obama's foreign policy, saying, "I don't think much has changed since the Bush administration." Ladies and gentlemen, Cindy Sheehan.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be back here in Madison. Of course, I'm not a stranger to this city or to the activists here. And I want to congratulate you for being clever enough to find this place, because we went up and down many stairways to get here. And of course, we had a lot of trouble. It was on, off, So it's back on, and we're here, and thank you for coming. And thank you to Christina and the Free and Equal for organizing this, and for all the hard work that Steve and a lot of people have done trying to keep it together and get it together. So anyway, since about 2006, of course, I wasn't an activist until my son was killed in 2004. I was a Democrat. And one of my new lines is, "Are you against the war, or are you a Democrat?" And I thought that was pretty liberal, to be a Democrat or progressive. I don't even know how to define those terms anymore. We were just talking earlier, hey, Lisa, when I was camped out in front of George Bush's ranch, of course, I had a lot of support, but I also had a lot of condemnation. And now I have a lot of condemnation and just a little bit of support. Because once you go against the entire system, instead of playing this Democrat-Republican game, where most of the country is in that paradigm, then a lot of support falls off. And so people want to say, what are you? Are you a Marxist? Are you, God forbid, a member of the Tea Party? So what are you, Cindy? You know what I am and what I've been, my entire life, but well known for since 2005? I'm against wars. That's what I am. So what do you want to call that? I'm a peace activist. And since 2006, when the Democrats told me to my face, Nancy Pelosi told me to my face, Harry Reid told me to my face, Hillary Clinton told me to my face, Barack Obama told me to my face, John Conyers, Cindy, help us get control back and we'll help you end the wars. And so then in 2007, after they gave George Bush more money to fund the wars, and after they refused to impeach him, I went to those same people and I said, what's going on? You said help us get back in power, we'll help you end the wars. And the wars are still going on. As a matter of fact, you just gave George Bush more money. And you know what they told me then? We need more. Help us get more Democrats in. And so I was like, no, fool me once. You know, I'm not going to waste any more energy getting Democrats elected. So I wasted energy running against a Democrat, Nancy Pelosi, as an independent. And so anyway, I started then coming late to life to this, that there really is no difference in federal politics between a Democrat and a Republican. And how, do you need any more evidence? Do you need any more evidence? There's a large democratic tyranny in our government right now. And not one progressive thing has been passed. They're going to give the president $33 billion more for his troop surge in Afghanistan. He has tripled the amount of troops in Afghanistan from George Bush's commitment. He hasn't even reduced the troops in Iraq like he said he would. 2009 was the worst year for our troops and for the people of Afghanistan. From 2004 to the end of 2008, George Bush had 23 drone missile attacks in Pakistan. From January 23, 2009 to today, Obama has had 76. So that's, to me, that's like a 300% increase without doing the math. And so they are the war party. And we need an alternative to the war party. We need an opposition party. And we need to start doing that in the grassroots level. We clearly can't go to the people who are staying in power with their corrupt laws and ask them to change those laws. You know, it's like, I don't know what it's like, but they're not going to change their laws. You know, it's like trying to get a lollipop away from my 2-year-old grandson. It's impossible. So you just got to let him finish it. So anyway, we need to do this in a really ground-breaking, ground roots level. And we can't do it by playing their whole left-right against each other game. You know, there are elements on the right that I don't want to have anything to do with. But there are people on the right who are genuinely anti-war, and they're anti-empire. So what we need to do is gather these forces together and say, let's agree on certain principles. And what we don't agree on, which is a lot, we're going to agree to disagree. But what we have to do, is the most urgent thing we have to do today, is stop our government from killing people. That is the most urgent thing we have to do today. And we're not going to be able to do it with a non-existent anti-war movement. You know, the Democrats in 2006, 2007 put this movement on life support. And the election of Barack Obama practically killed it. You know, where are the mass protests when Barack Obama is, his foreign policy is like Bush on steroids? Where are the people? Where are they? How come they're not out in the streets? You know, we had a protest with 8,000 people on March 20th. If Bush was president or if McCain was president, there would be 80,000 people. So we have to focus on the policies and realize that we in America, here in the United States of America, we have more in common than we do that separate us. And if we don't unite on what we have in common, this empire is never going to end. And as Americans, we're the only ones that can end it. So thank you.
Christina Tobin has devoted her life to protecting rights of all people to vote and run for office. As Ralph Nader's National Ballot Access Coordinator in 2008, she gained a deep knowledge of our nation's election laws. She has helped gather over 500,000 signatures to ensure voters had a choice when they went to cast their vote. She has secured ballot lines for numerous independent candidates and alternative political parties, including the Constitution, Democratic, Green, Libertarian, Republican, and Socialist Equality parties. Tobin is the founder and chair of the Free and Equal Elections Foundation, a nonpartisan, nonprofit public policy and advocacy organization dedicated to protecting the rights of the politically marginalized and disenfranchised, particularly third-party and independent voters and candidates. She also serves as the CEO of Free and Equal Incorporated, a ballot access consulting and petitioning firm. Tobin is the Libertarian candidate for California Secretary of State.
It's a dream come true following Cindy Sheehan here. Really, I feel very modest being here today. And thank you, Steve, very much for your warm introduction and doing this for us. I also want to wholeheartedly thank Steve Horn with the Campus Anti-War Network, who this would not be possible without him. You pulled off a miracle today, Steve. Awesome. And though Ben Manski may not be able to make it today, the Liberty Tree really has done wonders with the Haven Center and Patrick. As you know, to be quite frank, we put up quite a battle here with the union here at the university and really came close to violating our First Amendment rights. Fortunately, we're here today, and the ACLU and FIRE are happy about that. So hopefully when we come back in the fall, it will be a much easier process, and I anticipate that happening. I just wanted to briefly go into this panel of people that, ladies, all three ladies here right now, how I've met everybody. I mean, Cindy I met in 2008 the first time. I was thrown in after finishing all the ballot drives nationwide. Hey, organize and help put together the press for this Open the Debates rally for Ralph Nader during the time, the DNC and whatnot. And I met Cindy there amongst many other people, and that was the first time we really interacted. And since then I've met up with her in Portland, and we've been communicating quite regularly and found that we do unite on so many things. Oh, Theresa, being the former campaign manager of Ralph Nader in 2000-2004, my stance of being the National Ballot Access Coordinator, I could not relate to a woman more than Theresa, what she had to go through with Ralph and how he got the challenges in court cases, I believe in over 30 states in 2004, knocking him off the ballot or pending running as independent was monstrous. And for me to come on as a little road trip coordinator and a month later be the National Ballot Access Coordinator was a very mind-opening experience. So, Theresa, it's just been great knowing you. And Angela Keaton with antiwar.com, I mean, just these groups uniting and the things that I'm doing to really help protect organizations like hers that she works with to really protect the status quo, of which many people out here aren't being represented entirely by the two-party, well, actually the war party, one-party system. So I want to thank them very much, and Sean Scallon being here very soon with the American Conservative, writing the article of taking Cindy Sheehan to a Tea Party. Very interesting. It'll be really neat to see those two interact as he gets here probably in the next 15 to 30 minutes. But the real reason why I'm here today, I actually moved out to California. All my family's from Wisconsin. I have a family home out in Shawano. My dad's here today, somewhere, the guy getting all the cameras over here. But, oh, right back there smiling. It's pretty cool. But happy to have Dad here supporting me. Ironically, he runs the largest tax fighting organization in Illinois for about 25, 30 years, defeating the sales tax and really supportive of what I've done. Ran for governor in 98 and as a libertarian, was wrongfully knocked off. And just the roots of me crossing over to help Nader in 04 and so on, he was really supportive and understood the ballot access. So that was very important to me. And I moved out to California last October. I was recruited to run for Secretary of State to take the lead on stopping the Proposition 14, which really is a nationwide issue. It's horrible. If it passes in California, everything here today will be non-existent. What it is, the top two, means only the top two vote getters in the primary advance the general election. This means that the people with the most money will be the only two people on the ballot. It could be only 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans. It's Louisiana-style politics. They've had it for 30 years, from 1978 to 2008, of which no incumbents were knocked off the ballot. And it's horrible. They dropped top 2 in Louisiana in 2008. 5 incumbents were knocked off the ballot. More so recently, Washington State, 2008, they passed top 2. For the first time since Washington State's been a state since the late 1800s, no third party or independent advanced to the general election. Only 1 incumbent was knocked off the ballot, would have been anyway, because it was an unethical race. If this passes in California, it will spiral across the nation. The party will become one. The moderates, so-called soft-leaning Republicans, will merge with the Democrats, become a moderate. It will be boring politics. There will be no representation. Even the far left-right Democrats, Republicans are becoming disenfranchised. So disenfranchised that I anticipate holding a press conference, believe it or not, with the leaders of the Democratic, Republican, Peace and Freedom, American Independent Party, Green Party, and Libertarian, all in one on May 11th in California. I'll be interviewing on the largest radio station in San Francisco, KQED, on May 10th. It's great. And the AP just called me. I was too busy to interview with them today, so I'll be talking to them tomorrow about Washington's top 2. But in any case, it's very important that this is stopped. Electoral reform, how to break the system, uniting today with the groups Theresa Amato, Antiwar.org, Cindy Sheehan, coming together across the political spectrum to evolving into a much bigger event, which we anticipate happening in California in May, D.C. later this year, George Mason University, basically creating what is the Mimosa Party, could possibly transition to the Mimosa movement. And so a lot of fun with the dynamics of, well, what if there was a party? Well, it would be very difficult with electoral reform, the ballot access hurdles, the costly, the things that the parties will do to keep alternative choices off the ballot and even disenfranchise Democrats and Republicans. So basically, that's really the reason why I'm here today. That's how the story of a Mimosa Party evolved. Cindy emailed me a week or two ago, well, what about the Mimosa Party? And here we are, and we put this panel together with the help of Stein. He was pretty awesome doing it all, for that matter, but just to working together and really making this happen today. So ultimately, to end on that note, once we defeat Proposition 14 on June 8th, the campaign that I'm doing for Secretary of State will transition into true electoral reform, uniting and getting endorsements. I'm running as a Libertarian, would have ran as an independent, but it takes 173,000 signatures to get on the ballot. Would have ran as a Green. Well, took Libertarian. Cindy Sheehan has recently endorsed my race, which was so neat and so unique in itself. And we do anticipate a lot more endorsements after the election. But implementing true electoral reform, like instant runoff voting, like proportional representation, so this wasted vote syndrome will no longer exist. So thank you very much for coming today. I appreciate your time. Thanks.
Theresa Amato has worked for 2 decades as a public interest lawyer, from the local to the international, to advance civic rights by training citizen advocates, promoting access to information, watchdogging government and corporate power, and influencing public policy. A graduate of Harvard and NYU Law School, she is the founder of the Citizen Advocacy Center in Illinois and the current executive director of Citizen Works. In both 2000 and 2004, Amato served as the National Presidential Campaign Manager and in-house counsel for Ralph Nader to help produce the highest vote count in the United States for a third-party progressive candidate in the last 85 years, since Wisconsin's own Fighting Bob LaFollette, and shepherding myriad election reform efforts and litigation to open up the political system to competition. In 2009, the New Press published her book, Grand Illusion, The Myth of Voter Choice in a Two-Party Tyranny. Ladies and gentlemen, Theresa Amato.
Thank you, Steve, Christina, for hosting this, Free and Equal Elections. my co-panelists, and all of you for coming, and the University of Wisconsin for having us this evening. Good evening. So I remember the day back in 2004 when Howard Dean, who you may have remembered, many thought was going to be the Democratic anti-war nominee, was just about ready to drop out of the presidential race. Just seconds before he announced that he was out, he was on his cell phone calling Ralph Nader. He was already on to his next assignment, and that was to get Ralph out of the race. Howard the outsider had just become Howard the insider, marching to the same nervous imperatives of other party Democrats in 2004. He ran fervently as an anti-war candidate. You all remember that, right? Mm-hmm. Right. And now Howard Dean was lining up, along with most of the anti-war movement, even Dennis Kucinich, to support John Kerry. Right. I remember sitting in a conference room with Dean, Nader, and others, and listening to Dean explain all the reasons why Ralph Nader should not run. I couldn't take it anymore, and so finally I asked him, I said, well, do you think third parties should ever run? And he said, yes, but just not this year. Of course, that is what the two parties always say, as if minor parties and independents have to ask their permission when the word party is not even in the Constitution. It's never convenient for the two parties to have third parties and independents in the race. It makes it way too unpredictable. It threatens their hegemony, and they get flustered. The two-party candidates might actually have to talk to all the American people instead of just the folks while they're campaigning in Iowa or New Hampshire, South Carolina, or Wisconsin, Ohio, and Florida, and New Mexico. The battleground states, right? Yeah, they come to California to raise money. Right. New York and Illinois too, right? And then something dreadful could happen, like a John Anderson could get 17% of the vote, a Bob Loeffler could get 7% of the vote, and Bob could get 17% of the vote. A Ross Perot could get 19% of the vote, and a Bull Moose president, Bull Moose candidate Roosevelt could get 27% of the vote. Now, the American media doesn't like it much either when there's third-party candidates, independents. Even Ralph Nader, who was a household name, could only get 3 minutes cumulatively from the three networks in 2000. That's about 60 seconds per network, right? Wow. Now, I'm sure all of you could put out your platform and everything else in 60 seconds on network television. And even in 2008, Joe the Plumber, who wasn't running for president, got more time than that, right? So in 2000, the New York Times editorialized 4 times that Ralph Nader should quit the race, and Pat Buchanan too. They were, quote, cluttering the field. They were interrupting the American presidential election, and that the American voter just deserved an up or down choice on those two major party candidates. So that's the American media under the guise of some self-appointed winnowing process, telling the American people who they are allowed to hear and who they are allowed to vote for. And of course, the private organization that sits in D.C. on New Hampshire Avenue with an official-sounding name, the Commission on Presidential Debates, but chaired by the former head of the DNC and the former head of the RNC. And they tell the millions of people, the Americans who tune in after Labor Day, who's worthy of being their presidential candidate by who they determine is let into the debate. Isn't it convenient for them that since 1992, nobody has met their allegedly objective criteria? They made that mistake once, right, with Ross Perot. Mm-hmm. We haven't had an independent or minor party candidate in the presidential debates since 1992. And then the state legislators dominated overwhelmingly by the two parties, and still anachronistically petrified that socialists or communists might get on the ballot, have made it a national sport, a political hazing for third parties and independents to get on the ballot by producing this most insane and Byzantine ballot maze of regulations, really, that virtually no candidate can repeatedly conquer or routinely conquer without tremendous amounts of money. And this is just to have a chance to talk to the American people and be a candidate. So no, the two parties, they really like their incumbency. They don't want any of the races to be competitive. We now have to count races with 10-point spreads as close ones because the districts have been redistricted into these non-compete zones. Just about the only way we get anyone out of Congress anymore is by stretcher. In my state, which I come from Illinois, and we are infinitely interesting, we allegedly like to sell the seats, too. Stay tuned for the trial this summer. And then we have a Congress that won't pass public financing or free airtime for candidates because that might mean somebody without a millionaire's Rolodex could represent the public in Washington, D.C. And, of course, we have a Federal Election Commission, the FEC, that can't agree on what the campaign finance laws are because they are routinely divided 3-3, Democrats, Republicans, on most of the hard questions. And even the Supreme Court helps to ratify this bipartisan cartel by saying that states can enact regulations, and this is a quote, that favor the traditional two-party system, as if they have collective amnesia about those parties, the third parties, who put forward such inconvenient ideas as abolition, women's suffrage, the minimum wage. We could go on and on, right? In 2004, the Democrats and their allies sued us 24 times within 12 weeks to keep Ralph Nader off the ballot, including a little shameful farce here in Wisconsin, until the Wisconsin Supreme Court 7-0 put him and the late Peter Miguel Cameo back on the ballot. Ralph would have to start his speeches by waving the summons and saying, "This is what democracy looks like." And, then I watched with amazement as John Kerry, the anti-war protester, opened his nomination speech by reporting for duty. In that campaign, he promised to hunt down and kill the terrorists and generally out-Fallujah George W. Bush. And there were most of the anti-war people being good Democrats, holding their nose. With the anti-war the movement dissembling by the day, it took a mom here to camp on a dirt road by a ditch in Crawford, Texas, just to resuscitate it. I kept replaying these scenes in my head, and I said, what kind of electoral system turns anti-war activists who are in the streets one day into Democratic Party faithful to vote for more war the next? What kind of sick hope is it to think that by doing the same thing, voting for the lesser of two evils over and over again, that there will be change? And speaking of change you can believe in, how short-lived and short-changed, rather, are we when our country finally manages to elect an allegedly anti-war candidate, and then we find out that he and a complicit majority Democratic Congress vote to send more troops, more money, condone assassinations from the sky, keep the disgraceful Guantanamo going, and codify, continue the executive order policy of George W. Bush. What will it really take to get the elected in Washington to be held accountable to the people and not just in election years? Let's see. Who has been against the insatiable war machine, against the civil liberty violating Patriot Act, the renditions, the imperial aggression, consistently, and not just in the election years? The Libertarians, the Constitution Party, the Reform Party, the Green Party, the Socialist Party, Ralph Nader, other independents, etc. To end the perpetual war, we have to end the corporate-sponsored two-party tyranny. Now, you don't have to vote for a third-party candidate or an independent, But what do you say to defend their rights to exist? And what do you do to level the playing field for them to at least have a chance to present their views and have their ideas considered? Ask yourself, what was the cost in 2004 and 2008 because other voices on major issues were not heard on primetime television? What cost has it been to the American people, not to mention the Iraqis, that no major party would get up in 2004 on primetime television and stand up against the Iraq war? What cost has it been to our Treasury, our mortgage foreclosed homeless children, that no major party candidate would stand up in 2008 and object to the bailout of Wall Street before the bailout of Main Street? And what does it say about our democracy when two parties representing a fossilized, entrenched incumbency class, marinated in corporate cash, and still a decade now after 2000, are unable to register all of its citizens and count their votes accurately, but yet tries to make the American people believe that when anyone else competes for votes, that they somehow are spoilers of a spoiled, broken political system instead of defenders of the right to electoral choice in the United States.
Angela Keaton is the Development Director for Antiwar.com, the web's leading source of anti-war news, views, and activities, and the producer of The Scott Horton Show for Anti-War Radio. She also serves as the National Secretary of Outright Libertarians, LGBTQ Caucus, and the Chairwoman of the Board of Directors for Ladies of Liberty Alliance. From 1999 to 2005, Keaton hosted The Liberated Space, the libertarian talk and news show on the controversial KOOP-FM, Austin, Texas. She holds a JD and MA from the University of Florida. Ladies and gentlemen, Angela Keaton.
I'm just so glad to be here. I know what a crazy mess it was to get this all together. And Christina, this is amazing. The invite from Free and Equal came just at the time I had just told my boss that I had finally sworn off candidate-driven politics, like the disease that had hit me for so long. But that's not actually born entirely out of philosophy, and I want to talk a little bit about Antiwar.com was the brainchild of probably the most prominent libertarian activists of the 70s and 80s. So it's an experience born out of all kinds of activism, everything from street activism to running to candidate-driven politics, which is a little bit what we're talking about here. So there's a cynicism our organization has. It's somewhat subtle, but that candidate-driven politics can make that difference for all the reasons that Theresa and Christina said, and they're not being alarmist. That is the situation today, and it is why so many people activists turn away from the system and look for other methods besides electing people to public office. And I'm not certain. When I was looking up when Christina presented the original hypothetical with the top two tyranny in California, if that isn't actually the current system now, it would just be more formal once it's enacted. It's not as if you're going to notice that big a difference. It is kind of the selection you already have, which is a lack of choice. If choice in the ballot box is something that you want and something that's desirable. So there's a question of whether it's effective at all, and there's the second question of is anti-war necessarily an issue that can still be solved by traditional activism? I mean, there was a time when the anti-war movement had peace candidates, and it was something that one could do at a more practical level. I'm not certain that is the case today. And the successful anti-war movements, as my boss would put it, I mean, it's a case of doing everything all the time. You have to work at every single level, attack it at every single level, from moderate to, it has to be a broad-based coalition with a great deal of diversity so that many different kinds of people are anti-war, and there's many different styles of activism that suit that need. Not everyone is meant to run for office, and not everyone is meant to get chained to be chained to a cop car, though some of us are moved to do both, hopefully not at the same time. There's also, too, I mean, when you're antiwar.com, the nature of it, and we consider ourselves, it's basically a journalistic enterprise. Every day you wake up, and there's the new headlines there, both fact pieces from everywhere as well as opinion and policy pieces. So there's a bit of a think tankish nature to what we do, and that does influence candidates and politicians, but how it does that's a very interesting and subtle thing, and it's not as easy as we certainly don't tell people, go vote for Dennis Kucinich or go vote for Ron Paul. One, we're a 501c3, and that's something that also structurally inhibits the anti-war movement a little bit, that in order for people to stay afloat, when you're not selling a traditional product out in the market, you're selling basically ideas. You depend on donations, people who think it's worthwhile and valuable to give you money to stay that. But to have that status in the current system, and I do think it is all kind of tied to how the political system works. Is that how the 501c3s are limited? Is that we don't endorse candidates. I mean, not even close. In fact, just having Christina on running as a candidate, having her on a radio show, we had to be very careful about how we word things. I don't want to sound like I'm being encouraging or promoting one of the third parties or anything that would remove our status. As well as, of course, the situation where when you're dealing with candidates, you're dealing with a whole package of issues. I like Ron Paul a lot. I think he's a decent person and a very good activist. But when I say to someone, go vote for Ron Paul, I'm sort of saying that you're buying that entire package of issues, many of which have nothing to do with war, some of which probably wouldn't suit you. It's a very strange thing to do for me to tell you to say, hey, I want you to go in that ballot booth and check that box, and this is going to, this will happen next. None of that really does come to pass. That's just not how the system works. So we are hamstrung by all these different legal regulations even before we get to the issue of would getting a peace candidate elected make a difference. And the other thing, too, is, market demand. Is there even a market for a peace candidate? If you think about it, who were the people in the last election who supported an anti-war position? It was Chuck Baldwin, Cynthia McKinney, Ron Paul, Bob Barr, Ralph Nader. The oddballs, the people that odd people vote for. In other words, it's if you think about it, for those of us who've lived outside the conventional political system, that is strange. I know far too many people who have voted for Ralph Nader all 3 times, and that can't possibly be true of the rest of the population. How come I know so many people? Well, that's because it's a rarefied circle. It's very unusual, and the people who are motivated to vote for Ralph Nader all 3 times are a different kind of person, just not the typical voter. So there's even that issue of, well, if we got you the perfect peace candidate, would there be anyone lining up in the ballot for it? After all, think back to just the most recent peace candidate, Barack Obama. He was very clear about the fact that he intended to bomb the living hell out of Afghanistan and Pakistan. He didn't lie. He kept his promise. Right. And he's quite ambitiously doing so. So that kind of goes to the question. I know Cindy probably has wanted to pull her hair out on this, but all those lovely young peace people with all the hope and change signs and became so excited when Barack Obama got into office and are still excited and are still keep giving him a chance even though civilians in Pakistan gets their bodies blown to bits every day. I don't know how anyone could keep that in light of when they think about what actually happens. So that said, what candidate politics and the anti-war movement, how does that come together? Maybe some people will give me some answers tonight, but the one thing that we do is that we create influence in people's minds. We're not a lobby, so we don't lobby, but we tell people actual facts about what is happening every day. Hopefully that will change how people behave. What that means, what that translates to in the voting box, I have no idea. So how does one even project an anti-war position in normal activism? That's a really good question, given that there's just no peace lobby that's making any money. It's not as if we go to D.C. as a lobbying group, it's an abstract principle to try to create people, to explain to people how peace is profitable, even though there's quite a bit of evidence there. It just doesn't work. It's just that thus far not been very effective. So I guess I'm coming down to this. I want to see a vibrant, living, healthy peace movement. I don't know what conditions have to be recreated. I'm spending a lot of time reading about Vietnam again, trying to understand. I didn't know I need this information from college, but trying to understand what conditions happened that made it a successful peace movement. And hopefully I'll leave here with some answers about that tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Coming up the center aisle is Sean Scallon, fresh from his speeding ticket. Was that the? Yeah. So we may hear conservative views on speeding tickets along with his views on the war. Sean Scallon is an author, journalist, blogger, and elected official in Pepin, Wisconsin. He's the author of Beating the Powers That Be, Independent Political Movements and Parties of the Upper Midwest, and Their Relevance for Third Parties of Today. His work has appeared in the American Conservative and Chronicles, and he blogs for the American Conservative and Conservative Heritage Times. Scallon recently published the article, Taking Cindy Sheehan to a Tea Party. Ladies and gentlemen, Sean Scallon.
What do you want to say a few words?
I'll just take the vote. We're each going up.
5 minutes. Okay. Thank you all for being here. I'm sorry I'm late. As Elvis Costello was once saying, I don't like Mondays, so it's not a good day for me. We're talking here about this proposal that's coming before the state of California referendum that's going to establish a jungle primary. And what that is, of course, is what that is that everybody runs on the same ballot. You have a primary, I believe, probably in the spring or whenever, or in June, when California traditionally has its primary, and then whoever gets 50% is the winner. If they don't, the top two candidates go to a runoff. And the only other state that does that, traditionally had done this was Louisiana, but that was always a one-party state, a longtime Democrat-dominated state. Now it's become more of a Republican-dominated state. But that was, Louisiana always did that. Party affiliation really didn't start to matter in that state until probably the mid-1950s. It's a strange reform that California wants to do, from my point of view, from a non-major party perspective, because if anything, it weakens the party system there. Because politics being what it is, it's always filled with ambitious men and sometimes ambitious women, and it favors. I believe the reason it's being done is it favors the kind of candidates like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Carly Fiorina and Meg Whitman, people who are outside the party process, who are not activists, who have lots of money, and they can spend that money, however they wish, to get around having to go to dealing with either unions or, from a conservative point of view, the California Republican Assembly. You just go straight to the primary, and if you spend a lot of money, in California, as we know, is a media state, and where money matters because you have to buy media time in 8 different markets. If you get into the top 2, you win. So it really doesn't affect the status of non-major parties a whole lot, because you're still in the same boat. You are small, you don't have a lot of money, and in a state like California, you're really up against the wall because of those factors compared to a smaller state like, say, Vermont, which does have a very good third-party progressive party in that state, a very active one that has seats in the state legislature. So I find it a strange reform, but obviously it's one of those reforms, and we're seeing it going on around the country in many different states, which are trying to limit access to non-major parties from getting on the ballot. And one of the things that these parties all have in common is that many of them take positions that are against an interventionist foreign policy. And it really runs the gamut from libertarians or Greens or constitutionalists, which are the 3 major non-parties, to those outside of them. You really don't see a non-major party that is in favor of the current U.S. foreign policy. Politics in this country is should not be on a right-left axis. It should be on an axis that is between those who are on the inside who make policy and those who are on the outside that don't make policy, that have no influence because they don't have the money or they don't have the connections or they didn't go to the big school, the top elite schools, in the inside and the outside. Or I like to sometimes call it those who are cosmopolitan or those who are provincial. Now today, it was Sunday, I wrote, or late Saturday night, Sunday, it was really late. I wrote another article involving Sheehan on my American Conservative Blog. I don't know if anyone saw that or goes
I think
there.
you should buy me dinner now.
I had to beg for gas, so I'm sorry. It was called, "You Too Can Be a Tea Partier." And why not? You just declare yourself one. Seriously, there's no one saying, who is Sarah Palin? Or who is Dick Armey to say you're a Tea Partier or you're not? There's no bylaws. There's no party structures. This is a very open system. It's just a very unorganized movement. It is a movement. And that's what movements are. They are unorganized. They're groups, but they're very unorganized. They're very loosely affiliated. And it just dawned upon me, or seemed to me, or the way I figured it, that anyone could call themselves a Tea Partier. It didn't matter where you are supposedly on the spectrum, either on the far right or far left. I think you have to adhere to kind of 4 basic principles, though. And those principles should be that you are opposed to big government. You know, I know many people, that often is kind of a right-wing answer, but it could be a left-wing answer, too, if you oppose the empire and you oppose all having, you know, well over 700 bases around the globe and oppose the domination of both foreign policy and economic policy of the military-industrial complex. You can also be opposed to taxation, especially if your taxes are going to pay for bombs that drop on innocent civilians in countries thousands of miles away from the United States. You can oppose wasteful government spending, especially when it's for the military-industrial complex and our interventionist foreign policy, and all the money that is wasted either for foreign aid or to topple governments or to promote economic policies that very much devastate third world or second world economies, such as free trade, for example, which is not free at all. It is subsidized trade. So, as I wrote, it seemed to me that being a Tea Partier really was sort of a matter of the way you, so long as you adhered to those principles, you could easily call yourself one. But really what binds all of that together is the sense that that people are on the outside of this decision-making process. That's why they're angry, because the politicians bailed out the banks with their taxpayer money, and even though they might have protested, it just happened anyway. Or the government bought GM, or whatever. They went to war in Iraq. There are any number of things that unite that whole group along the same lines. And if you view it from that perspective, then it makes sense to have a Tea Party movement larger than what the media or even some Tea Partiers might perceive. So my remarks.
Okay, so Ben Manski still fixing his flat tire. If he joins us later, we'll try and get him in on the discussion. But what we'll do now is just go to a single question for the whole panel to open up and allow them to talk to each other, and then as soon as possible, we'll go to the larger group and take questions. So the question, it actually ties back to something Angela said about candidates being a package of issues. And so the question is, because of that, is it possible for people of such divergent views to actually unite behind candidates as a way of furthering the anti-war movement? And we have microphones at the table, so I'll just throw that question open, and anybody who wants to can jump into that.
Oh, I'm ready to tackle that one. It's as someone my whole identity is so strongly invested in my anti-government stance. And I don't say it out loud very often, but I'm an ordinary anarchist. So for me, I have to think about very, very carefully what the priority of issues are. I can't think of anything more important than stopping mass murder. I just can't. So I'm willing to give up the fact that I'm against, commie medicine, and I'm going to give up my anti-tax stance and all that because it's that important to me to stop murder. So am I willing to do that? Yes. And I think if there can be a broad-based anti-war coalition that does back a candidate, if we just all discipline ourselves and stay focused and make a conscientious decision that this issue comes first. That's it. That's all there is to it.
Does anybody else want to tackle that?
Sure. First of all, let me respond to Angela and say, anybody who voted for Ralph Nader 3 times, thank you.
Yeah.
And it's not true. It's really not true that to vote for a third party or independent candidate, you have to be somehow an oddball or a kook or some other kind of fringe person on the fringe. A lot of non-voters came out for the first time because they said they had somebody on the ballot that they could vote their conscience for and not just their fears. And I think part of the problem is because of the many, many structural barriers we have to third parties and independents, a lot of people, rational people, look at those structural barriers and they say, well, we can't overcome that. And therefore they stick themselves into the Democratic or Republican Party. But believe me, that happens at the two-party level too. I live in Illinois, and it's very clear political turf. In Chicago and suburban Cook County, you're a Democrat if you want to vote for anybody in the primary or the local election. In DuPage County, where I used to live for many years, you're a Republican. That's part of the winner-take-all system. But if we change that kind of system that is devolved into one-party politics at the local level, we wouldn't have people who were afraid to run and be an opposing party and be able to run for other parties if we had a cumulative voting system, if we had minority representation, if we had proportional representation, if we had instant runoff voting. So we have to change the structural barriers. And getting to Steve's question, I think that is something that people from across the political spectrum can back candidates for. When you have a candidate who's running for electoral reform and saying we have to get rid of these kinds of structural barriers, and that could be across the political spectrum, people could support that particular candidate. I know that we've done that and made friends from all over the political spectrum. And then, once those barriers are down, you can compete for the political mind space of what your particular ideology is. But there is a collective set of interests in reforming the electoral process that people can subscribe to no matter where you stand on the political spectrum.
Okay, I'll go next. My experience running for Congress against Nancy Pelosi in 2008, first of all, I ran as an independent. I ran as a fierce anti-war candidate. I was running in San Francisco, so I had a diverse platform. I wasn't just the anti-war candidate, but of course, anti-war and accountability for war criminals was two of my major planks in my platform, and that was in 2008. And so I thought I would come into San Francisco and have a natural base there. And many of the anti-war groups in San Francisco said they couldn't support me because of their 501c3, but then they supported Obama. So, that was just something really weird. That's just an aside. So that experience running against Nancy Pelosi opened my eyes fully. I thought that you could still run for office in this country on a federal level on a very energetic, humanist platform and have a chance. But the system in the federal level is stacked. It's not just stacked against us. It is impossible. It's impossible to overcome that system. So my run against Nancy Pelosi changed me into an anarchist. And so, but I do think that there is more chance of us being successful. People think of anarchists are running around, burning things and throwing bricks. Yeah. The only time I ever wanted to throw a brick was actually through the window of the anarchist office in Pittsburgh because they banned me from a meeting. And I thought, they have an office and they have a hierarchy and they have a structure, and they ban me from a meeting. You know, I think how ironic to throw a brick through their window. And of course, I was going to autograph it too, but I couldn't get a ride over there. And so anyway, that was also off the subject. So anyway, I think we have to work on a real local level for election reform. In San Francisco, we have publicly financed campaigns. We have term limits. We have runoff votings. And we have Green Party members in our city and county government and on our school board. So if we could get it in places like San Francisco and Madison and, you know, Chicago, all of what you would think the more progressive places could be, then the only way it could go would be up. So I think it is really effective to work for these issues and work for candidates on a more up to state level that are working for these kind of things. That's where you should put your energies. I know federal politics is glamorous, but we have no effect on federal politics. We have no influence on federal politics. As a matter of fact, we just, like Theresa says in her book, we only have an illusion of choice in a very diluted system. So that's what we need, that's my opinion, is to work very locally. And then we can celebrate victories, we can work for the people, and then you run into the person you worked for, and if they're not doing what you want them to do, punch them in the face. But in a very peaceful, nonviolent way. You know? So that's my opinion.
Yeah.
In talking about the difference between local level and federal politics, and I would also agree with Cindy on this, that the more you're going to have more effect if you really want to be in the non-major political world. You're going to have more effect on the local level, especially when the offices are nonpartisan, like they are for Wisconsin, for example. I am on the Pepin County Board of Supervisors, but that is a nonpartisan. Like most offices in Wisconsin, that's nonpartisan. So you can be really whatever you want to be. And I choose to be a libertarian. I choose to be a constitutionalist. And I've got someone from the local Republican Party trying to recruit me. But I said I want to be like those independent insurance agents on those TV commercials where you say, you're not locked into one policy. You represent many policies. You represent many different points of view, but that run along the same thread and a common thread. And so that area, if you can, and that's not true everywhere, of course. Some places, they have Democrats and Republicans down to the county corner level. But the more you can get offices nonpartisan, I think that's one reform. Instant runoff voting is another. The more that you can switch that over, the more opportunities you will have as a Green, as a Libertarian, as a Constitutionalist, as a Socialist, whatever you want to be, to gain those kinds of offices and make a difference for yourself on the local level. But now you have to ask the question, okay, what can you do on the local level? And that's going to be something that's going to occupy the thinking of non-major party activists for the foreseeable future, because you can gain. I've heard of stories of libertarians who would get to public office and they really wouldn't know what to do, because the issues sometimes that they would deal with were really not things that to translate down to whether or not you clean your streets or whether or not the problem with dog feces in the local park. And they would be so flustered that sometimes some of them would read, Ayn Rand into the record. I've heard that anecdotally. I'm not saying it's everyone, but that's the kind of thinking. And you're starting to see this already, at least from a conservative point of view. Even during the Bush administration, there were states that were already adopting, really opposing Real ID, opposing the Patriot Act. And these were conservatives. These were states like Montana and Arizona and Wyoming. These were not just, it wasn't just Vermont or, a liberal state like Rhode Island. These were states that, from their perspective, even back then, had seen the encroachment of federal power and decided to stand up and do something about it. And they did it from the local level. Now, you may not agree with that from their particular point of view, but I think you have to respect their perspective. And you're seeing this more activism on the right now. I mean, obviously, when people throw out words like states' rights and nullification and interposition, those are becoming now fashionable, when 2 or 3 years ago they were not. But it should be able to take place on all sides of the spectrum, whether it is resisting the draft or resisting having, make city ordinances not having military recruiters in your town. I'm just throwing out an example from a left-wing point of view. So there are any number of things, and that's the ideas that have to come forth. If you're going to be able to run for local office, you got to be able to think about what do we want to do, what do we want to accomplish here. It's not just vainglorious. I do think, however, I will disagree in one respect. I think you can still have, at least maybe on the federal level, the state level, or the congressional level, you can still use the primary process as a way to influence the two major parties. If you're able to build a large grassroots coalition like the old Nonpartisan League of North Dakota, which I wrote about in my book, and even the Wisconsin progressives were like that in a way that they were able to take advantage. They were, a third party. They were able to take advantage of the fact that Democrats really didn't have much of a structure up here at that time. The Nonpartisan League is a great example because it was able to use, it was a one-party state, North Dakota, but they were able to use the Republican primary. You won that primary, you were basically elected. And I still think that example can still work if you have, whether it's a labor coalition or a religious conservative coalition that can run candidates, raise money. It's been proven over the last couple of years that can be done over the internet and raise, money at least to be able to compete in elections. And being able to influence the way that the parties think. Even if you didn't win, you would still have an influence on the winner. So I still think that that's possible. And that's why this California referendum has to be opposed, because they want to destroy the primary process. They want it so that a candidate doesn't have to talk to the activists. They want to avoid that. They want to just spend money on ads and create their image and run on that image. They don't want to talk to anybody if they don't have to, and they won't, because that state is so big that they don't have to. So that's why I would strongly urge people in California to consider turning this down. If you want more Arnold Schwarzenegger's being governor, then this is what this referendum is all about.
We've had a long line of crappy governors, by the way. Not just, we had Ronald Reagan. Hello. Not anymore.
I wanted to jump in, and first of all, really thank you to WYOU for doing the live stream on this. I forgot to thank you for that. And big thanks to Rainbow Bookstore back there, selling Theresa Amato's Grand Illusion books. Feel free to, Theresa would be happy to sign those afterwards, but they've been a huge support across the board, so thank you for that. And it's great to hear all these concepts of uniting people and whatnot, but how do we do it? First of all, actually, Cindy and I heard this at the Rainbow Bookstore today. A guy by the name of Chris Hedges, former bureau with the New York Times, brought up the Obama statement, and I thought it was very catchy. Being from Illinois myself, family in Wisconsin, and involved with suing the Democratic chair in 2004 for wrongfully using full-time state employees from his office and successfully knocking this Mr. Nader guy off the ballot. Not cool. But in any case, very involved with the Chicago politics like Theresa. And it really is what he is as a brand for the system, whether it's Bush, whether it's Obama, brand Obama for this time and period. And what he has done to get there, as we know, the transcripts open. Blagojevich is going to go behind bars. I mean, Rahm Emanuel and Obama wheeling and dealing, no different. He shouldn't be treated any differently. The problem is the system, the brand, and kind of going on into that, how do we break away from that brand? We create a huge online social network tool. Free and Equal will be upgrading its website drastically, of which leaders nationwide will have access to each state page, implementing not only ways to get on the ballot, the hurdles to look out for, how many signatures, ACLU, organizations from the Liberty Tree to others on the top of these sites, antiwar.com, links, and also guidance of of debates in your area, creating locally, use the free and equal logo, whatnot, to protect yourself, to shield yourself, and in any case, implementing this nationwide. So this is a very important aspect of really uniting people across the spectrum, and just imagine something like that being at the fingertips of uniting everybody. So that's kind of, I think, a real key to electoral reform, is creating like the online election reform Wikipedia for people that are outside of the system. So can look forward to that in the upcoming months. So,
okay. And thank you. And now we'll go to audience questions. So I'll take the microphone, and which was here, and now it's gone. So.
The microphone?
Oh, I'll just, yeah.
Okay.
I'll just pull this out of
Sure,
here.
and they can walk up.
Actually, if people are going to remain seated, then actually let's
Just take that one.
Okay. Great. Good idea.
Pull up. Does this work?
it will. Yeah.
Get some cord here so we can get out.
My bag.
I know that one dude.
Hello?
Just walked out with a white.
Okay, so we'll take audience questions at this point. So if anybody would like to ask a question, just raise your hand, and I'll bring the microphone over.
Thanks. I was struck by what the gentleman in the end, I'm not good with names, sorry. Sean and Cindy were saying you about the effectiveness of running locally on this small level, and it's true across the nation. Outside groups hold office and sometimes do radical things like refuse to uphold the Patriot Act or what have you. And then what you were saying about the Tea Party and how anybody could. This is a huge movement that has. Well, I don't know how huge it is, but it has certainly attracted the media's attention, yes, in a huge way. So I started to think, okay, so what's the common thing? And the speakers, all of you, were saying that there are, people who are opposed to war in within the Tea Party. But as I'm going over this in my mind, I'm thinking this would instantaneously splinter into the left and right of the Tea Party, because there'd be people who, we're against federal spending, but just not those welfare moms, but we're pro military spending, and then on the right-hand side, pro military spending, obviously. So I'm thinking, what is across the board where we couldn't be splintered too much? States' rights, and they're big-time states' rights against the federal government, the smaller government. So you protect state rights while at the same time voting in progressive candidates at state levels. Would this be, do you think, an effective way to use some of this energy that's stirring around big time with the Tea Party in order to actually effect change?
I hope that there is a left-wing Tea Party and a right wing of the Tea Party. Because maybe if there is, then they'll start to think about why they feel the way they do. If they feel, I'm against big government, but I like my military base. I mean, I don't know if you read the story online about there was a Tea Party demonstration when President Obama was in Florida at Cape Canaveral. There was a Tea Party demonstration because they opposed his space program, which was actually cutting money. Mm-hmm. Money. I mean, they like NASA because it's a job. And a lot of these places, there aren't a lot of jobs. And that's why there is that kind of connection, even though they might say, I'm anti-government. I mean, that's easy to say. What kind of government are you against? You against the federal government? You against the state government? Against the local government? What? Maybe somebody should, if you have more people in it, it's not a large movement. 18%, I think, is about right. It's not a very diverse movement. There are some people of color in it, but it's mostly white. It's mostly older. It's mostly male. I mean, I don't deny that. I mean, it is what it is. But maybe it would benefit from that, from this perspective that I have, because it would be a lot harder for the media to say, you're this, you're in this ghetto, if people like you were Tea Partiers. it would be a lot harder to say that or marginalize them or say, well, they're just going to be Republicans. Because that's the biggest threat they face is that, and we've seen it already, that whole Tea Party Express that Sarah Palin was on, it was a paid-for job done by a Republican consultant based out of Sacramento, California, Sal Russo.
Yep.
Who is, used to work on Reagan. He's a veteran Republican operative. And what do operatives and public relation peoples do? They try to get an angle, and they saw it, and they slapped a Tea Party Express on a bus, and they put Sarah Palin on it, and they paid for it, and they raised nearly $3 million. I mean, it's hucksterism, but that's what they do. They're, you're going to call them shysters, that's fine, but that's what they do. And the question Tea Partiers have to ask is, who gets to ride on the bus? Who gets to go to the conventions that you have to pay $500 to hear Sarah Palin speak? I can hear Sarah Palin speak on YouTube anytime I want. I don't have to pay $500, but somebody thought I should to go to this hotel and sit and listen to speakers. The whole conservative, it's really not a movement. It's a corporation, and its job is to part people who think, conservatively with that mindset, or people who are ideologues. Their job is to part them with their money, whether to sell them books or to sell them. And I've been writing about this for at least over a year, and I think it's disgraceful what they do because these people are hurting, and so I think. I hate to use that phrase, but if more people, if the Tea Party was broader, and it thought it would, I think, allow for more diversity of opinion, and then it would be harder to just dismiss it as, well, these are just Republicans who waited until there was a Democrat in the office.
I have a comment
sure.
because she also directed her question towards me. First of all, in California, where I'm from, in southern Los Angeles County, which is close to Orange County, there was a movement in probably the late 70s, early 80s, and a lot of school boards were taken over by right-wing Christian reactionaries. They tried to ban a lot of books and, just do a lot of weird things in our schools. And, if that movement could do that, because somebody told me when I was on my book tour, I have a book too, Myth America 2, The 20 Greatest Myths of the Robber Class and the Case for Revolution. It's an online book. But when I was out on that book tour, some man said, we need to get Howard Zinn's People History of the United States in every school across America. And I said, I agree, but why don't you start in your school? So if the right-wing Christians could take over school boards, why couldn't, progressive humanists do the same thing? And I mean, that's where we need to be. We need to be teaching children about the true history of the United States and critical thinking. That's been taken out of our schools a long time ago. And I actually was interviewed by Politico, I think it was, about the Tea Party movement. And on tax day, CNN, I think, did a poll. And they polled the Tea Party. And they asked them things like, or members of, they didn't poll the Tea Party, but members of the Tea Party asked them like, do you trust the government? What do you think about taxes? What do you think about all this stuff? And I was like, wow. The anti-war movement was never polled about anything, so, and then the anti-war movement, except for one small, brief period of time in August of 2005 when I was camped out in Crawford, Texas, has gotten no media coverage. So what is all this coverage about the Tea Party? Because as, Sean rightly pointed out, it doesn't reflect America. Why are they polling a bunch of white men? Because that's not what America looks like. It's what part of America looks like, but America is way more diverse than the Tea Party movement. So what is this energy and media attention being given for? It's being given so many of us, I'm not including myself, who were Democrats and supported Obama and voted for Obama, and are starting to see, wow, he's really not what I thought he was. I'm going to maybe go towards a third party or a third party candidate. But then they see Tea Party people, and I know Sean comes from a different place, a more grounded in, good ideology. But then there's some teabaggers who are bringing guns and who are threatening to kill Congress people. And so the people in the Democratic Party are going, oh my God, if I vote for a third party, that's what we're going to get. So it's just all establishment based. It's supporting the establishment, it's supporting the status quo. And so we have to be real careful when we're talking about the Tea Party, where I agree with a lot of the people and what they're saying, and they're not everything, against the teabaggers. And they're and they're very reactionary, and they get the left to pull their knees up and go, no, I don't want that. So I'm going to stick with what I know. I'm going to stick with what's safe. I'm going to vote for another Democrat.
Okay, I think we have
response really quick, and I know it wasn't addressed, but just quickly, as running for Secretary of State in California for Libertarian, first of all, if Top 2 passes, the Tea Parties will no longer exist. This movement, grassroots, all these organizations that are really representing the people, status quo, will vanish. So it's very important to go to the website stoptop2, TOPTWO.org, to learn more about that. But the one thing I want to briefly mention is that I tested it. I was invited to a Tea Party on April 15th in Chico, California, in Oroville. And I spoke in front of a group of hundreds of people. And I said, right in front, my background, that I was the former National Ballot Access Coordinator for Ralph Nader. And the response was positive. Very right-leaning crowd. Oh, Chico's as conservative as it can get. And it was positive. And next thing I know, a couple days later, I get a call from a radio station from Chico, a left-leaning radio station that said, wow, Christina, of all the panelists, you are the one I want on this show. I went on the show, and now I'm invited to 2, 3, 4 more Tea Parties. So testing out, doing a trial period and see, is the Tea Party the way to go? Maybe, maybe not. Is a movement the way to go? Yes. So that was just what I wanted to comment on briefly. Thanks.
Thank you. Maybe a couple more questions.
Okay, I agree with what Cindy Sheehan said about Tea Party movement. I don't believe it was mass-based. It never has been. The anti-war movement, now that was mass-based in 2003 because I was there in February of 2003. There were over 1 million people who turned out. And it was really eye-opening to me when I turned to the papers, the Washington Post, the next day. You should go do the research on this. There was just a small article about the anti-war movement, the big protests in Washington. We had over 1 million people there. I was there. There were 1 million people there. Now, I'm a Marxist. I believe that consciousness changes only after material conditions change. The idea that you can just tell people that the war is bad, you can tell them all you want. That's not going to change their beliefs. You have to change the material conditions in which people live, and then people will change their beliefs. Martin Luther King one time said that we need to move from a thing-oriented society to a people-oriented society, and he's right. And how do we get there? Well, that's a good question. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how to get there. But we need. I think that the electoral process is just one component of this democratic system, supposed democratic system. I don't think it's very democratic. It's a dictatorship of the rich, as far as I'm concerned. They dominate everything. They dominate what we see in the news. They dominate what we read in the papers. So I don't trust anything coming out of the corporate media, period. The Tea Party movement is a media creation. It is not a mass movement. And the idea that, what you said, Sean, you got brushed by the repressive apparatus of the state, I would think that would turn you around a little bit. But did you tell the cops to go screw themselves after they said they were going to give you a ticket for speeding? I mean, you got to deal with the repressive apparatus of the state, and that's a product of the class structure. Okay, we're not going to make this a free and open and fair society unless we deal with the repressive apparatus of the state. Are you going to ban the police? And once you take office, that's something we have to think about. And the electoral process, it's one component, but I think this this discussion here is a very valuable thing. We need more of this.
Anybody want to respond to ban the police?
I have a stay away order from the White House. I mean, I have told, if I step in the perimeter of the White House, and this just happened last month, I'll get a mandatory 6-month sentence in jail. So, and that's for being arrested in front of the White House last month. I was arrested 10 times in front of the White House when Bush was president. Never got a stay-away order. Never had to spend overnight in jail in Washington, D.C. I spend 2 nights in jail, and then I get almost like a restraining order away from my house, you know. And so I have told the police that. I have said that right to their faces. And but they are. What's happening now is they're becoming, instead of servants of the people, they're becoming servants of what I call the robber class, you know. But they're in our class, and I tell them, why do you have your guns pointed at the anti-war activists? Why don't you have your guns pointed at the true committers of crimes and violence, our state? You know, so I don't think that every cop is bad, not far from it. But there are some real stinkers out there, and they need to be told that.
And to jump in on that, I can relate to Cindy to a certain extent. In 2004, when I decided to sue the Democratic House Speaker, that is Michael Madigan, as we all know, his daughter is the Attorney General. Next thing I knew, I had people following me. I had to turn around and say, "Can you please stop following me?" Going down an elevator, they'd go back up. Also, we did a protest in front of his office, not 1 week in a row, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks in a row, over and over, up and down. And by the 4th or 5th week, we got a lot of media. We had a permit. It's public property. And they threatened to sue me, and they actually did. I'm sorry, not sue, arrest. And they actually did arrest one of the individuals. So, I mean, gathering signatures from 98, 2002, had police officers knock on my door to serve me for saying that I was fraudulently gathering signatures from my dad at that point, who was running for lieutenant governor. So, I mean, the harassment is extensive, and I couldn't agree more with the Tea Party movement. The anti-war movement is for real. The media is just so skewed. In California, Prop 14, they're not even listening to both sides, and many of them are endorsing it because it was a Maldonado, Arnold Schwarzenegger backroom budget deal last February, to pass the budget. So, I mean, in any case, Tea Party movement, I mean, is it really real? As far as the anti-war, I don't think it can be compared, but the anti-war movement, uniting with other organizations across the spectrum, yeah, that's a movement. So, thanks.
Maybe one more question, then we'll wrap up.
Well, if I'll go last, maybe I'll do a little summary. It seems like no matter what our issue is, whether it's peace or stopping mass slaughter or healthcare, mortgage, whatever it is, our main 2 problems are the media, which is the first one, and the second one is the electoral system and the way it's financed. I think the media, hopefully technology is going to take care of it. When people can access the internet on their televisions, it hopefully will take the corporate 200 channels and allow people to have more access to other channels on their television. I think that's the biggest problem with the media, because we could put millions of people on the street and we get 4% of the coverage before the invasion of Iraq. We can run third-party candidates, but we get 3 minutes, as Ralph Nader did. So the media is the first problem. The second problem with the electoral system, I think that's such a big problem that I don't think you can go at it like, well, I'm so for peace, and then you just get knocked down. I'm so for a certain healthcare bill, but you get knocked down because of the lobbyists, the contributions. I mean, that's the major issue. We can't, ignore that. So I think if we could put aside some of our other issues and join together, kind of as the Tea Party is more like the liberty capitalist side. If we could get like a justice democracy side to rise up and put all our other issues together and say we're going, full steam to get public financing, or what you're doing with proportional representation and all these other issues, and the website Why Tuesday. I mean, why is it on a Tuesday that we vote when working people can only vote between 5 and 8, and they have kids to pick up and they have to get dinner ready? Why can't we have it on a Saturday or a Sunday or a national holiday or whatever you want to do? So if we could do that, and then we put it into like what the Tea Party did. They're all patriots. Well, we're patriots for democracy. We push that as a democratic thing, and then once we do that on both a local and a national level, we see what happened in San Francisco, where when they make the changes, all of a sudden Green Party candidates get in there. And if we could do that on, yes, local all over the place, but don't give up on the national, and if we could have join together for a national movement to do that on a federal level, that's where the change is going to come from, not from chipping away at the outside or trying to get third-party candidates to work through the system, because we know it's set up against us. So we have to change that big system, both on the electoral side and the media side. Media side, everybody start websites and start talking as much as you can, write books. On the electoral side, we have to come together in some effective way to make that change.
Can I respond?
Go ahead.
Yeah, at the Tea Party, I don't feel very strongly about it. Actually, during July 4th, we all know about that Rick Santelli thing that came out, right? Chicago, big deal. It was at that point that I got involved with the Tea Parties, because there was this group called ReTeaParty.com that called me up and said, wow, this Tea Party is being taken over. The coordinator at that time, by the name of Eric Odom, told these guys of Re-Tea Party, I'm letting Newt Gingrich endorse us for 1 million names in return. And they said, that's wrong. So they got a hold of us, a Free and Equal, and we did what we had never done before. We worked with them to organize a Tea Party. What did we do? We organized a Tea Party that had left people, Theresa Amato as a speaker. We had a Green Party, and Re-Tea Party was able to manipulate the search engine so much that it came above the Tax Day Tea Party. But to give you an idea of how horrible the system is, Facebook. We had a page on there. They shut it down 3 days before the event. Facebook did.
That's happened to me too.
No reason. We had a disclaimer on that page saying this wasn't the real Rick Santelli. Wrong. They didn't respond whatsoever. On top of that, Tax Day Tea Party was telling all the media that it was canceled. We still held it in front of the Navy Pier. It was okay, a rainy day, but in any case, we killed that Newt Gingrich movement that was stirring, and with Re-Tea Party. But it just goes to show that the Tea Party itself just so tainted from the beginning, and so I really hope that this panel discussion it is going to be amongst the first of many. We'll probably be transitioning to California in May and growing, and then eventually transitioning into a conference out in D.C. Latter of this year. But I just wanted to say thank you. That was a very great combination of this event today, and very, very knowledgeable people in the crowd. So thank you for coming.
And I just have one thing really quick, surprise. The one thing that just happened that nobody's talked about here, and some libertarians support it, is the United Citizens versus the Federal Election Commission, which made corporations, which give corporations carte blanche. On election-related things, corporations have no limit. And some people say, well, that's good because, we shouldn't limit corporations' freedom of... They said that limiting a corporation's money limited a corporation's freedom of speech. Well, corporations don't have mouths. But they have unlimited amount of money. But that all has also lifted our limit. But how many of you have $1 million to influence an election? So now it's not 1 vote per person. It's like 1 vote per dollar. So they can spend millions of dollars on elections, and we can't. So that just effectively killed any chance of us having a say in federal electoral politics. So what we have to do is, first of all, we have to work on overturning corporate personhood. Corporations are not people, God damn it. They're corporations. So until that happens, it's the corporations. We have a corporatocracy. And I know that's not free market capitalism. You don't have to even get into that with me. We have a corporatocracy. And until that is overturned, I don't even know what our national, activism should be. That's why we need to be tribal and not national.
Thank you. Thanks to our panelists. Thanks for everyone for coming.
Or do we
Yes.
have...
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Theresa wanted to
Yeah.
say something.
Thank. Okay. Thank you. I think essentially what we're talking about is shifting power and shifting power to people. And Citizens United versus the Federal Election Commission definitely did it in the opposite direction. And there are a number of good organizations that are working on these things too. And I don't like to leave any meeting or discussion like this without having a discussion about where you can learn more. And I have to say that I've been a grassroots public interest lawyer for many, many years, and I've also worked at the federal level. But we can't just abandon the federal level, because in order to fix some of these structural systemic problems, we need people working at the federal level. We need people working at all levels. There's only 535 members of Congress. It doesn't take all that much. In fact, I used to live in Henry Hyde's district. Remember Henry Hyde from the Hyde Amendment? Right. He used to say 3 people called his office. It was on his radar screen. 7 people showed up at his office. The TV cameras were there. We have so much power if we use it correctly to hold people accountable and to change the national discussion. We have to do that at all levels of government. So I don't want to abandon the federal level here, because just to work at the local level. Thank you.
Oh, thanks to everyone for coming. Thanks. Yeah, sorry, Sean.
Just one thing. Before people walk out of here in despair because their wallets are empty compared to Cargill or ConAgra, we'll point out in this state, this once was dominated by lumber barons and railroad executives, and they bought state legislators. And one man stood up and broke their power, and his name was Robert La Follette. And in North Dakota, an organization of farmers broke the power of the Minneapolis bankers who controlled the price of their wheat. So the idea that, yes, corporations are powerful and they have money, but if money judged everything in politics, we'd have President Perot and we'd have President Forbes and President Connolly. So it's not always about money. Yes, it is an important part of politics, but there are ways, if people are together and are in a movement, it can make a difference. You know, C. Wright Mills once said, go to where the energy is. Where are the people moving? And that's why the Tea Party get media attention, because they're confrontational, because the media likes drama. They live for drama. Can't be boring. So you go to a town hall meeting, you confront your congressman. You get in his face. And that's why they got coverage, even though it may very well be only 18%. You know, you go to where the people naturally go where the energy is. Go to where there's movement. That's why they covered Cindy Sheehan. He's one person standing outside of George Bush's home. But she was there, and the cameras were there. And they followed because there was one person willing to stand up when nobody else was. And so that, you know, just judging from my own experience working on the Ron Paul campaign, we took an obscure Texas congressman. We didn't win, but he has more name recognition now and more influence now than he did when he first started in politics, when he was the Libertarian, far more than when he did when he was the Libertarian presidential candidate. We had nothing other than the internet to raise money and our own ideas. That was what was so much fun about that campaign. It was a do-it-yourself campaign. We did it. We waved signs. We rented a blimp and put his name on it and flew it over. Nobody told us to do it. We just did it because we were tired of a politics based on consultants and based on hacks and based on money. And we said, we're going to do this ourselves. If we win, we win. If we lose, we lose. But we made an impact far more than presidential candidate Brownback or Gilmore, because we had real people doing these things. It wasn't just an internet-based movement. We had over 1 million votes. It was far more than any Libertarian candidate has gotten in a federal election since the days of Ed Clark. So, I mean, it's easy to despair when you get a court decision like Citizens United and say, well, we can't do anything, we don't have any money. But I think we found ways around that. And as for the media, well, I mean, you've got network news is declining ratings, newspapers losing circulation, You know, if the internet is not anything, democratization of media has taken place already, and will proceed further. I mean, especially from the generation coming from me and lower. I mean, that's the future. I mean, once that past generation passes away, is there going to be a culture war? Is there going to be, I mean, the issues are going to become so completely different than what they are now. And it'll be a wholly different power structure. So keep that in mind as you leave.
Well, and I don't want to I think people misunderstood me. I'm not saying you don't, anyway, we have to build a movement that comes from the bottom up. That's what's anything that's changed, and Sean just proved my point. The Ron Paul campaign was a very grassroots campaign. You know, the populist movements of the early 20th century that changed anything were very grassroots campaigns. So that's to build a sustained movement that has energy and sustainability. It can't come from the top down. It has to come from the bottom up. And that's all I'm trying to say. And that's when we're going to have the influence. When we have a mass movement, a grassroots movement from the bottom up, that's when the federal system is going to change. We can't go to the feds and say change, because they're not going to change. We have to create that energy in the grassroots. And that's what this entire panel is so good at, because we come from different, most of us come from different philosophies. That's what I've been trying to get at. You know, not saying that we're not ever going to change anything, but because that's the only way we've ever changed anything in this country for the good, has been from the bottom up, not from the top down. You know what rolls downhill. And I'm not going to say it because we're being simulcast.
And on a final note, I worded as closely as I can remember, but one of the most inspirational quotes I've actually heard from Ralph Nader. I mean, I've had Ralph endorse my organization, also Ron Paul, completely across the spectrum. But, you know, the true definition of a leader is a leader that can create more leaders, not followers. And just here today at this UW-Madison event, I have to wholeheartedly thank once again Steve Horn, a true leader here in this room. So it's really... And a leader like that, myself, Ralph, has helped to make a leader out of me, to help make and more leaders and more in this room step up, unite for when we come back here in the fall. And really, as Cindy said, you know, the real reason we're doing this today, create our own media. We don't rely on the media. We create our own media. Break the system. How do we break that system? I talked to Ralph Nader's right-hand guy, and I said, well, how about one race? One race that wins, that's unbreakable, breaks the system, and that's why I've decided to do what I never thought I would do, is running for office in California to break this top two primary, to bring in proportional representation, to unite more awesome organizations like this, and this is the beginning of a real movement. So I want to thank you very much for being here today, and I'll leave on that note. Thank you.
And I really appreciate our panelists trying to wrap up on a more positive can-do spirit. I was getting really depressed there for a while, and then you just sort of saved us at the end. I appreciate that. I do want to remind everyone that Theresa Amato will be signing books in the back. There she has copies of her book, Grand Illusion, The Myth of Voter Choice in a Two-Party Tyranny. So I urge everybody to get a copy of that, and thank you again for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
I thought they were out to stop.